Hey, and a very warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast with me, your hostess, Joanna Hunter, metaphysical teacher, spiritual life and business coach, published author, and the high priestess of the LightWeb, a spiritual technology that will change your life. This is the place to be to talk everything under the LightWeb, from consciousness, relationships, to money, to spiritual business, and everything in between. Hey, and a warm welcome. It's Joanna Hunter here for the Into the LightWeb podcast, and we have got another $1 Million Lab series, and I am joined by an extraordinary entrepreneur who is a bit of a digital nomad and travels 3 months of the year. His name is Ray Blakney, and I'm going to hand it over to Ray to introduce himself. Hi, Ray, and a warm welcome.
Hi, Joanna. Thanks for having me on. So I'll give your audience a quick intro of who I am. I like to say I'm the typical Filipino American who grew up in Turkey and lives in Mexico, just like every other one that you know. In my free time, I bootstrap businesses. So my specialty is I bootstrap online businesses. I bootstrap multiple seven-figure businesses online. Right now, my primary business is livelingua.com, which is an online language school, and another one called podcasthawk.com, the animal hawk, which is a software product that actually helps you get booked as a guest on podcasts. In my free time, I spend my time with my family, love to travel, and I'm a semi-professional sword fighter. So that's it.
Oh my God, that's so cool. I've got to ask about the sword fighting. How did you get into that?
I figured. So I've been doing it for, I feel old now, almost 20 years. So what I do is I practice a Japanese martial arts called Kendo and Iaido. So it's Japanese fencing is the Kendo part, and Iaido is forms with a Japanese katana. I've been doing that for about 20 years now. I've had the pleasure of practicing all over the world. I even tried out for the US national team. It's a competitive sport in Japan. Didn't make it, but I at least got to the place where I was good enough that they sent me to try out for it back in my 20s, back when I was younger, faster, and able to compete with those people. But I still do it today. There's a big philosophy of meditation, getting your mind and body to align as one. That's a lot of it. That's why a lot of people practice it until they're 60 or 70, unlike some of those other sports, box, jiu-jitsu, which once you get to 35 or so, your body really can't do it anymore. Kendo people can do their entire life.
I love this. When I grew up, when I was a little girl, my father was friends with a Japanese samurai, and the form is absolutely beautiful. And so he used to come to our house sometimes and make us sushi, and and he was always, we lived in Stockholm at the time, and he was always dressed in like Japanese clothing, and he had the little wooden sandals and everything. And I have so many fond memories of our friend Taichi Nakamura. And so I love this idea of this sword fighting. I think this is really cool, because I used to remember being mesmerized when he would go out on the green, and he would show us his movements and things.
That's what I practice right now. That's the art I practice right now. So there's a meditative side, which he was showing to you guys with the forms, and then there's the competitive side, which you use more of a bamboo sword, and that's when you actually face off against somebody else. You obviously don't use a metal sword to do that. Most people wouldn't practice the art very long if they did that, right? I've been doing that for almost 20 years now. I plan on doing it the rest of my life.
Oh, it's gorgeous. What I one of the things I love about that kind of culture and the Japanese culture is really like the element of the meditation being a part of the martial art, because often in sports there's not much meditation taught, or the mindfulness taught, and in a lot of them, even the Chinese and the Japanese kind of different martial arts and things like that. And I think that's really good, because I've spoken to a few entrepreneurs who practice meditation through a martial art, which I always think is really quite an exciting combination in a way. And have you found that this has helped you to focus on your business as well?
Absolutely. So there's two aspects of meditation in Kendo specifically, and these follow across to almost every martial artist. You mentioned Japanese. I did Kung Fu for a while as well, so I have a little experience in the Chinese martial arts. And the way Kendo practice starts is you start and end every practice with meditation. So something they call mokuso. So you sit down in a position, you get in a meditation position, and it's only for 2 or 3 minutes. But the idea there is when you get there, the point of the meditation when you start is to leave the outside world behind and focus on what you're going to do in the next hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how long your practice is. So it's kind of this clear separation of what's outside and what's inside. The meditation at the end is exactly the opposite, right? It's not necessarily to clear your mind. It's to, shift out of what you were doing for the last 2 hours and shift back into your regular life. So that's one meditative state in martial arts. The second one is actually while you're sparring. Because in Kendo, there's a saying called Kiken Taiichi, which means mind, body, and spirit is one. And to score, you need to have all of those things aligned. Otherwise, just hitting somebody is not good enough, right? You have to yell, you have to kind of have the right position to do it. And I find, especially when I'm really stressed out in my businesses, this is amazing, because when you're sparring with somebody, when you're facing off with an opponent, and keep in mind, Kendo's an art where men and women face off with each other, because since you're using a weapon, the whole strength thing essentially gets eliminated, right? So men and women compete against each other, taller, older, everything kind of gets balanced out. But you can't think about anything else at that point, right? You can't be thinking about, did I check my email at work this afternoon? As soon as you do that, you get hit, right? So you need to be in the moment when you're practicing at sparring and martial arts. I find that very meditative as well. I mean, I cannot think about anything else for those 2 hours. And that is incredibly releasing. I mean, it sounds restrictive, but it actually is really freeing when I don't have to worry about anything else in my life. Just that moment where I am right now in what I need to do in this moment. And then that translates over to work. I do the same thing for work, where I meditate at the beginning and end of each day, kind of to put myself in that mode. And I try to get into that mindset where I'm focusing on doing what I need to get done now, not worrying about things in the past or worrying about problems in the future. It makes me a lot more productive.
I love that. And I think that's a big mistake with people's meditations. A lot of people have got the impression it's about clearing your mind, which is a total impossibility, because the moment that you have the thought, I must clear my mind, the thought of I must clear my mind is in the head, right? And so for me, my meditation practice completely changed. I was meditating. In fact, it was Tachi Nakamura that introduced my family to meditation at around about the age of 4. But then I began in my 20s to really meditate. And where it really began to click for me was when I realized that it was actually not the elimination of thought, but as the opposite, the focusing of thought, and having that thought all laser focused, which has helped me tremendously in my business as well, in growing my business. So tell me about the multiple businesses that you've had, because what has been the driver behind this? Was this something that you did from when you were young? You were like, this is what I want to do in life, or has all of it unfolded organically?
Okay, but that's a great question. I'm going to start with a little caveat that if you hear somebody yelling in the background, I do have a 1-year-old. And while I told him I wasn't going to be in an interview right now, he does not seem to respect that. So if you guys hear somebody yelling, I do apologize for that. So going back to being an entrepreneur, it was one of these strange things where I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was a kid, I was that geeky, Asian kid that you saw at school with big glasses. Picked last for sports, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to be a computer programmer because I liked playing computer games, so I wanted to make computer games. Not until later in life did I figure out that making computer games and playing them are two totally different things, and one is not even close to as fun as the other one, right? So that was my impression when I was a kid. Oddly enough, though, if you look at my, junior high school and high school yearbooks, and the person that they said, who's the most likely to start a business, everybody always picked me. So it was something that everybody else saw, but I never saw it in myself. I think it was a little bit of a lack of self-esteem back then. Skinny Asian kid, bad at sports, gets picked on. I won't say it was bad. I had friends. I wasn't like ostracized, but I was, smaller than everybody else.
It was challenging, right?
It was challenging. Also, I was 2 years younger than the rest of my class, and I didn't realize that was a big deal. But when you're 10 and your classmates are 12, you are obviously the shortest person in the class. I'm 6 foot tall now. So I'm not really a short person, but I thought I was really short until I was at least 22, because I was shorter than all my classmates and my peers until I got into my 20s. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm actually really not that short right now. And then I started doing exercise, and now nobody considers me small anymore. So that was the story of my origin story. It was not, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. In fact, I went to college and I studied computer programming. That's what I got my degree in. I got out And I did what everybody else is supposed to do, right? What you're supposed to do, quote unquote. You go to college, you get a good job at a big company that you're supposed to work at for the next 40 years so you can get a pension. So what happened was I did that story. I kind of went through, we talked about it, Joanna, before our call, that my grades were good enough to get graduate, but yeah, that nobody was going to be hiring me on my GPA. Luckily, I got a decent job as I'd worked my way through college, so I had some experience when I got out. Some employers, and I think better employers, look for that more than somebody who knows how to game the school system, right, and get A's. They're like, oh, this guy knows how to do it. This guy can start working on day one. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I luckily had a few job offers back then. The economy, I kind of graduated between some of these ups and downs in the economy. It was pretty good. So there were jobs out there. Started working there, worked a little bit in Silicon Valley as a programmer, worked for a Fortune 500 company. The job was fine. I'm not going to say, a lot of people say I hate my job and that was their impetus to change. For me, that wasn't it. The job was fine. It paid fine. I was okay. I didn't realize I wasn't happy. Because it's what we're trained to believe these days. Okay, I had a condo, I had a car, I was going to buy a nice bigger condo and a bigger car, right? That I was on the journey of life.
You were following the path.
That's it. That's it. But I always had this nagging feeling behind me that there's got to be more to life than this, right? I mean, do I get a bigger TV next year? Is that like happiness instead of my 50 inch? It's a 55 inch. I don't even have a 50-inch TV, but just as an example. So then something strange happened. I saw a commercial on TV, and I doubt there are very many people out there who can say their life was changed by a TV commercial, but I was one of those people. It was a commercial for the US Navy. And while all my respects for people in the armed forces, if you start shooting at me, I'm going in the opposite direction as fast as physically possible. So it didn't inspire me to join the Navy. But there was one quote at the end that I remember from this commercial. It was dark, a boat pulls up on a beach with all these military guys kind of come off, and a quote stops. White text came up on the top of the screen that said, if they were to write a book about your life, would anybody want to read it? And I remember just staring at that and thinking, if I continue on this path, no, nobody will read this life. What, he sat in a cube for 20 years and wrote code, maybe became a team lead or even VP of tech and wrote more code. I'm like, this is not the life I want to leave behind. It's not that I want to be famous. I don't even want to write a book about my life, but I want to live a life that if somebody did write a book about it, other people would read it and like, okay, that was a life well lived. So I literally, within 30 days of that, I had quit my job, applied for something called the Peace Corps in the United States, which is a volunteer organization where you get paid about $100 a month. I sold all my stuff, moved to southern Mexico and volunteered within the indigenous community down there for 2 years, helping them out, which is where I met my wife. And which is what led me into entrepreneurship. I've started my first 2 businesses with my wife. One of them we sold, and the biggest one, livelingua.com, we still run together. And without that journey, I would never have gotten to entrepreneurship. It was an accident that I got here.
I love that. I don't think there was an accident. I think everything unfolds as it's meant to be. But I think, I love that it was that advert and that call that spoke to your soul, really, and spoke to a bigger call of something. A bigger calling inside that called you up, basically. And I think many of us have felt that feeling, if there's got to be more to life. So I had exactly the same. There's got to be more to life. Mine was a little more dramatic. Mine was that call. I heard it while I was laying in a hospital bed with multiple organ failure. And I had literally burnt myself out to the point where my organs were failing. And then I was like, what am I doing? There's got to be more to life. There's got to be another way to live a life that is well lived and that makes you happy, but also as well benefits the world in some way. And that was my, to start with, that was my premise, to get myself better from that situation, and then to, create an impact in the world, which I feel like I'm absolutely living right now. And I think it's so important that it can start that small, like a few words on a television screen, a feeling inside. You can unfold this incredible giant adventure. And I think for everything is the courage that it takes.
I agree with that 100%. So the more you practice this courage, the easier it is to do it in the future. So I've gotten to the
Yes.
point where, in fact, jokingly, my wife says, you have a little bit too much, because I don't hesitate to try new things anymore. I mean, it just doesn't faze me, but I've been practicing it now for going almost on 16, 17 years, right? Since I made that decision at 26 to leave a comfortable corporate, almost six-figure programming job and, strike out on my own into the unknown. One of the things that helps me with that, kind of going through it, is the mindset where you realize that if this doesn't work out, you'll still be okay, right? In the sense that it's not the end of the world. If a business fails, for most of us at least, you're not going to be out on the street. You have friends. A lot of people have family. You know, my parents, they probably wouldn't be happy with me moving back into at home with them. They're probably very comfortable in their lives. But if I needed to, I could go back and, get a job as a programmer, get a job doing something, because the skill sets that I've learned over the years, that is my worst case scenario, is I can get a job. To
Yeah.
me, that is actually a worst case scenario.
Oh,
But if
that's
you look
nice.
at life that way, yeah, exactly. But
I'm
most
like
people, that's
practically
it.
unemployable now.
That's it. I don't know what I get a job in, but I could get a job. But really, if you look at life in that sense, that if you're the kind of person who takes the initiative to make this change, you're also the kind of person who could go back and get a job with somebody. That's your worst case scenario. If you have friends and family, your worst case scenario, you might have to stay with them for a month while you get up on your feet again. We're talking like, world exploding worst case scenario here. When you look at it that way, it's like a little embarrassing, but that's not bad. But that embarrassing mindset is what stops a lot of people from doing it. I don't want to be embarrassed, so I'm not even going to risk living my best life on the off chance that I might have to live with my parents for a month or two. And
Yeah.
that is a really bad excuse for not making these steps. And after you've done it once, twice, three times, and maybe one or two of them failed, but one or two of them worked, trust me, the ones that worked offset the failures so much that it's not even a
Yes.
consideration. I mean, one
Yes.
thing has to work and your life is transformed forever. The one thing I'll add to that is make sure you figure out what you really want out of life before you start on this journey. I made the mistake of not doing that in the first business. I thought starting a business was working 60 hours a week for 10 years and then maybe starting having some free time afterwards. 3 or 4 years into it, like you, Joanna, luckily no health issues, but I was burning out. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I haven't had a day off in 3 years. I realized that's not what I wanted out of life. So I had built a successful business that was taking me in the wrong direction. We sold that business. We sat down, we reevaluated, okay, what do we want? And for us, it was kind of freedom of time. And we rebuilt what is now livelingua.com. And honestly, I just hired a COO for the company on Monday. It's been 3 or 4 days ago. So, we're pretty much, somebody else is going to be taking over the day-to-day operations for that pretty soon. I work on building new businesses, which is my passion. I love it. I would do it for free if we got to the financial point where I didn't have to worry about money again. I would do this for free. I do want to start a charity to help people do it once I get to that point in my life. But that's because I have a clear vision of who I want to be and what makes me happy. And I don't build businesses or get involved in projects that don't take me in that direction.
I love that. Do you know what? I want to rendezvous back to something that you said that you didn't, the first time around, you didn't get it quite right. And I did the same thing. And I think this is a rookie mistake that we make from transitioning from the employed world into the self-employed world, is that we don't bake the ingredients in of what we want into the business from day one. And I did the same mistake. It came under what I call I will be happy when scenario. So I will work this business and I will do this. And then at this certain point, somewhere in the future, I will suddenly have all this time freedom. And yet the business demanded every hour that I had to give. Where was I going to get that time freedom from? Because it needs to be in from the start. And the mistake that we make is that we don't believe that we can do it that way, right? We don't believe that it can't be that easy, right? It can't be that easy. You could be time free from day one. No, you got to work like a horse, and then you can maybe. And so I did the same thing, and I did 7 years with no breaks, and
Oh, yeah.
and that was why I was in hospital, right? That was why it was like,
You have more stamina than me. 3 years is when my body was like, yeah, you just can't do this anymore. This is, I told my wife, like, we need to sell it. We need to close down next week. I'm like, I just cannot do this anymore.
and it's so hard. It's so hard, and it takes a lot of courage to flip the switch on that one, because at the same time you're making money and it's your source of income, and then you're going to flip the switch on it, right? And so I don't know if I've got more stamina or if I was just more stupid, basically, because I'm willing to hold like my hand up to that one too, right? But what one of the things that I really encourage the entrepreneurs that I coach and I help is that, I really encourage them, take the ingredients that you want to see in the end result and bake them in from day one, because if we don't, it's not good. It's not good. It's not going to magically appear. If it's like, if you make apple pie, but you make it with blueberries, it doesn't become apple pie after it comes out of the oven, right? Like the ingredients that went in are the ingredients that come out of the oven. And it's the same with our business. Like if you create a business that needs every hour of your day, 10 years time, it's still going to need every hour of your day.
And I'll add something to that. So something in the middle of the journey, because I agree with everything you say, just like you, Joanna, I've lived it. I mean, I've lived exactly what you're talking about. Another warning I'll give to the listeners here, if they get past that point, they launch the business, they have, the right ingredients for their pie. I promise you, you're going to reach a point where, to use your analogy, the pie is kind of baking itself. The problem and the trap there is we're so used to the same thing we talked about at the beginning. We have to work hard to get there. So we start looking for work even when there isn't any. Mm-hmm. I found this was about the last 2 years. I'm on this journey right now, but my businesses have luckily grown to the point where I could probably go away for a month and nothing will happen. But I'm not comfortable with that yet. So I go in every day and I'm like, I need something to do. So I start creating work around it. And you start being your own worst enemy, even though your goal is like, if your goal is time freedom, what got you this far is not going to get you to the next level. And that mindset shift is really hard to break through, because it's the same thing we had in the beginning. We've been taught since we were kids that you work hard for 65 years or whatever, and you retire and then you enjoy life. Breaking that cycle of thinking, even on the minor scale of, okay, in my business, I worked hard to get it here, so it means I must have to work harder to get it to the next level. That's not actually in most businesses. I was stuck at the same level in my businesses because that was my mindset. I'm like, I worked 50 hours a week to get here, so maybe if I work 60 hours a week, it'll get me to the next level. That's not how you get from 7 figures to 8 figures. I'm learning it. I'm working with mentors. I have a mindset coach. That's not it. You have to learn to let go, which is actually a very hard part of the journey, is to let those people who are good at their jobs.
Lesson.
Exactly. Because
it's been my hardest lesson.
It's the 100%. Entrepreneur myth. Nobody can do it as well as I can, right? That's like what we tell ourselves. I guarantee, I answered customer support emails for the first 4 years because I thought I was the best customer support email person in the world. No, I'm not. I don't know what, now looking back, I'm like, what were you doing? What was I thinking? I'm awful at customer support. But at that moment, I didn't want to hire anybody because of that. As soon as I did, my world opened up, and I had much more free time for more important work things and more important things in life.
One of the energies that I see in this, and this has been a challenge for me as well, but one of the energies is that what happens is that we drive the vehicle with our foot on the gas, floored right down, right? But when we do these things, like answer our own customer support emails and things, which it could be an easy job to be outsourced to someone else, but yet we're doing it, right? Mm-hmm. There is this thing in the back of our mind that we know that if we get busier, there's going to be more emails. Mm-hmm. And we're not loving answering the emails, right? So we got our foot totally on the gas. We're going for it. But the other foot goes on the brake. Mm-hmm. And we're slowing our own roll, because we're doing the things in our businesses that actually we have no business doing anymore. Absolutely. We have outgrown that piece. Like when you have to bootstrap it all in the beginning and you're doing it all yourself, like kudos to you, because that's how I started my businesses. Did the whole thing all myself, my graphic design, all the things. Like there was nothing that was outsourced. It was like me and my computer. But then as I started growing, there were certain things that's like literally a bit of a waste of my time to be doing. But those create these vibes in your energy. You're just like, oh, I'm so over this. But that's actually what creates the foot on the brake scenario. So quite often when we outsource these things, you just said that you just hired a CEO. I hired this year, I hired an OBM, so an online business manager, that freed up a lot of my time. And I saw exponential growth. Why? Because I'm not got my foot on the brake anymore, because I don't perceive if my company gets busier, I'm going to be like busier. Now my company is free to get busier, and and it's just free to get busier. Doesn't mean I'm busier.
Yeah. So I actually have a question for you, Joanna, then, because you and I seem to be in the same phase. The biggest challenge I'm finding is I'm feeling a little bit of guilt, in the sense that, it feels like everybody else is doing the work, but I'm reaping the rewards. Now, I know mentally that I've been working on this company for 12 years, right? So it's not that I haven't done any work, but it's this weird feeling right now where I'm so used to being busy all the time that I feel guilty that I can go and have a coffee in the middle of the day for 30 minutes in the garden and just, play with my 1-year-old son. I'm like, while everybody else is working. And that's actually, for me, being a big challenge. I don't know if you faced that kind of mental challenge as well.
I have in the past, but I also understand how my energy works. So my company is based on my energy, literally, and your company will be based on your energy as well, right? So there is something magical that happens when you sit and have that coffee in midday, and you're sitting on the grass playing with your son, and you're in the vibes of that, and you're like, really like, I am in the moment right now. And then when you go up after that to go and work on your business, something magical happens. It's like liquid gold. It's like you've tapped into something powerful. And the ideas that you have after you've had that rest, they're so powerful. They're more potent than if you push through and just push through. So what I've discovered in my own business is that rest is a sacred spiritual practice. And it's just like your martial art practice, right? You have got to practice sacred rest. And if you can see these moments as moments of sacred rest, and the way that I work with my spirit team, when I work with them and I'm meditating and things like that, they showed me waves on a shore. When the waves are coming onto the shore, we're flowing out the way. That's when we're making the money. That's when people are like taking notice of us, and they're like, oh my God. But for every wave that goes onto the shore, another wave has to move back in to the ocean. That's where we get concentrated. That's where the liquid gold happens. That's where that's where the genius ideas come, right? That can flow the wave onto the shore again. And so I've started to see that my business is this ebb and this flow, and that I need the ebb and the flow, because I can't be, when I was on 24/7, like it was a hospital trip and told that I maybe not leave there. So for me, now I honor this ebb and flow thing. And I realize I have no guilt when I rest, because I realize that it's so potent to the success of my business. And that makes it easy. And then that way these guys can be working, because they're in a job, right? So it's a different situation, because I never sat in my job and was like, oh, I knew what was up. I had been hired for a job. The hours were this, the holiday was that, so they're all
after 5, you don't think about work at all, right? I mean,
exactly.
when you're working at a job,
Their eyes wide open, right? They signed on that little dotted line, eyes wide open. They knew what they were getting when they did it, which is amazing. And so, so I think you can't compare your entrepreneurship to your employee, because your entrepreneurship extends in every moment of your life, which means even in the moments where you are resting, your entrepreneurship is working in the background. And we need that ebb to concentrate the energy. And then we take that concentrated energy and we flow it out into the world. And when we flow that energy out into the world, it's so powerful, so potent. But if we just keep flowing, it starts getting diluted. People are like, nah, they used to be really good, but I don't know what it is now. It's not hitting in the same way that it used to. But if you have the ebb and the flow, every time that somebody experiences the flow state of you, it is powerful and potent.
I apologize for the phone call. I thought I had
That's
this thing
okay.
on.
No worries.
I love everything you said. So I always say, plan your rest as more, spend more time planning your rest than you do planning your work. I wish I need to follow that more, because so I do have a ritual where every 6 months, I do it on a grander scale, right? Every 6 months, I take 1 week off. So there's this beach house in Mexico where we go to every 6 months. I book it 6 months in advance. As soon as we get back, I book it again for 6 months. It has,
Okay.
I can get one bar on my cell phone there, no internet. That's kind of the point, right? I mean, it's on this beach in the middle of nowhere. I need to start doing that on a more weekly or, on a more micro basis, right?
Absolutely.
Planning around my days and
100%.
all the rest of it. And I find that the week after I get back from that 1 week vacation is actually the most productive week I have in those 6 month period, right? Because your mind is fresh. Everything is,
So
for the first
fresh.
4 to 5 days, I rest. I know I'm getting tired because by day 6 or 7, my mind starts thinking about work again, despite my best efforts, right? I usually just read a book. This is not a TV. This is not a let's get online thing. It's just, I take a bunch of books to read. And yeah, by day 6, I'm just sitting there looking out of the ocean and my mind just starts to come up with these ideas for work, and I have a notebook next to me.
And it's
Then
effortless.
I just start writing them down. It's effortless. I mean, in fact,
effortless.
it's the opposite. I can't get it to stop. I mean, it's just, it's just flowing out at that point. It's not conscious. I'm not trying to do anything. It's just coming out. And that's when you write it down. So I love it. I need to start thinking about my rest on, my daily rest like that.
The way that it looks in my business is that when I have anything like I'm teaching a class or I'm doing something where I know I'm going to be in a flow state, so I'm really delivering a lot, I always schedule the next day or the day after. I always schedule sacred rest then. Mm-hmm. So every flow that I do, that I'm conscious that this is going to be a flow time for me and I'm going to really flow my energy out into the world and I'm powerfully creating something and I'm going to be giving a lot, then I always balance the giving with the receiving. So then I receive, and the receiving is to schedule time off or to hang out with my kids or to go somewhere nice or to do something like that. And then that way there's a weekly balance always, because, every week I'm teaching some sort of class, but every class that I teach is balanced with time for rest, and it keeps the energy potent, and you never get into the what I call the F my life vibes. The moment that you're in those vibes, you're really like your energy is dipping so much that you can't hold the power any longer.
It's burnout. You're at burnout at that point. And I've gotten better at recognizing it. But it took me about, like you, I obviously recognized it at the 3 points. Yeah, I mean, at the 3 years, I recognized it. But it's come and gone since then. You don't have to work 3 years constantly to reach burnout. You can reach burnout in 1 month of hard work. You can reach burnout in a day of hard work. For me, it's coming to recognize how that feels for you that I think is important. For me, at least, the way it feels is I can't think. It's kind of hard to describe, but I will come into work really motivated, like emotionally, I want to get work done. I sit on my computer and nothing comes out. Absolutely nothing comes out. And then that's when I have to consciously think, examine what's going on and think, I'm burned out. That's what's happening right now.
The well is dry.
The well's dry, exactly. I mean, the will is there. I'm trying to force my way through it, but there's absolutely nothing. And those days are usually, if I push through it, it's a waste of time. Because then I go back like the next day and I look at what I did and I'm like, wow, I need to redo all of that because, I was so burned out when I produced it that it was just really, really bad work.
Exactly. So no more guilt for when you're taking the time off, because that's how you refill the well, right? That's how the well gets refilled.
Consider it as part of work, right?
It's part of work. It's part of my work. My rest cycles are as integral to the success of my company as me being on fire, dropping liquid gold, channeling, giving out the information that I give out, and people be like, wow. And then me being like, it's too peoply out there, closing the doors. It's all Joanna time now. That is the potency of it. Tell us a little bit about you bootstrapping companies and started companies. What is the driver behind there? Is there a theme in your companies that you have, like, I want to have companies that change the world, or is there something that, like, is there communication, or what is the connection? Because I know you've got a podcast company and you've got a language company. Is there like a really cool driver between all of them?
There actually is a connection between all of them, but it's not really in the business ideas themselves. It's how they come about. Okay. So my most successful businesses are always because I see a need. So I'll take a step back here. In my worldview, there are two types of entrepreneurs. First off, they're the visionaries, the ones who create things we didn't even know we needed. And then like we all go out. That's exactly the analogy I always use, the iPhone, right?
The iPhone, right?
A year before the iPhone was out, nobody was saying, I need an iPhone. No. But then they
Nobody
came
was
out,
looking at
everybody.
their Sony Walkman and
Yeah,
their Nokia and
little
thinking,
flip
I need
phones.
to put these together, right?
That's
No one
it.
was
That's
looking
it.
at
Nobody
that.
was doing that, right? I'm not that kind of entrepreneur. That's the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk's, people are creating all that kind of stuff.
Amazing, right?
There's the second kind of entrepreneur, which are the entrepreneurs that see a need, see that nobody's meeting that need or nobody's meeting that need well, and they meet it themselves. And I think that's most entrepreneurs, and that's where I solidly fall into that category. So the story of Live Lingua is my wife and I had opened up a brick and mortar language school in Mexico, ended up being a small chain of brick and mortar language schools in Mexico. Then Mexican swine flu hit. For those of you who remember, this was back 2008. It was supposed to be what COVID is right now, right? There was this big fear. So they closed off Mexico borders. Nobody could come in. Most of our students came from overseas. So essentially our schools, the students dried up. And we had no idea if this country would be closed for a whole year, right? Like COVID, it has closed things down now. So we had the idea of, look, Skype was relatively new back then. Why don't we start giving classes on Skype, see if anybody wants it, just to our existing students. So we started doing that. We had a lot of success, and I'm a computer programmer. I'm not a graphic designer, as you alluded to this. So I threw up this awful looking one-page website. I had the technical skill, but it was really, really bad. Like, let's see if anybody else in the world wants this, because there seems to be a need. Within 6 months, we were making more money off of that than our brick and mortar language schools. And the swine flu lasted 30 days. 40 days later, our schools were fully booked again, and everything was going well. So we saw a need, we went in there. For podcasthawk.com, it's exactly the same thing. So there's a whole theme of me starting businesses during pandemics, because last March, obviously, COVID hit. And suddenly our Live Lingua exploded. Everybody was stuck at home. They said, hey, I want to learn a new language. If I'm stuck here, I might as well learn Japanese or Spanish or French. So our business grew 40% in 30 days. I mean, we were scrambling, hiring teachers.
I love it.
Luckily, it worked out as like a benefit for other people. Because a lot of teachers had lost their jobs at the brick and mortar schools. So we were able to help them out by hiring them for us. And all these students were coming in. So our business grew, and I was looking for ways to get out in front of a larger audience. I primarily build businesses on online marketing, which is search engine optimization, Google ads, Facebook ads. So that's kind of where we were at. And I said, I should appear on some podcasts. I'd been on about 40 or so shows before, over 5 or 6 years. So a show every 2 months or so. How hard could it be to find podcasts to appear on, right? So I went on Google. I'm like, let's find some podcasts to pitch. Yeah, that doesn't work for anybody who's tried something like that. That is no way to find podcasts to appear on. Maybe I'll go to iTunes. That must work, right? That's where no, that doesn't work either. There's got to be something out there that helps you find all the podcasts in the world, lets you pick the right categories and get their contact. Nothing. So I spent about a month figuring out, is it possible for me to build something like this? Just technically, is it possible? Can I get all the podcasts in the world? Can I get their contact information? So I spent about a month, did some tests, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So for the next 9 months, I essentially built what is now podcasthawk.com. It's a directory with every podcast in the world, every podcast episode in the world, and every review in the world. So Joanna, you can go in there today. And
I'm gonna check this out. This is so cool.
I mean, and I'm using it, right now. It's not how you and I got in touch, but I'm using it right now. So you can go in there and say, okay, I'm looking for podcasts that talk about mindset, that have the word mindset in their description, have at least 26 episodes, have released an episode in the last 30 days, have at least 4.5-star reviews on average, and are in the English language. And I always tell people, I challenge you, go to Google and find that while I do that in Podcast Talk. So I hit the button, it takes 2 or 3 seconds, and I get hundreds or thousands of results. Or you can go in Google and spend the next month trying to do exactly the same thing. That's what it does. It gives you all the contact information now. We're in beta. We're going to be in beta for the rest of this year, and we're officially launching in January. When we're done, we're going to send the email pitches out for you as well. So you pick all the ones you want. Depending on your plan, we'll send out 25, 50, or 100 pitches a month. So all you do is sit back and you wait for the replies to come in saying, okay, yeah, I'd love to have you on my show, Joanna. I'd love to have you on my show, Joanna. You take it from there with a Calendly link and all the rest.
I love that. That's so cool. That is actually a genius idea, because that makes it so much easier. And I have a lot of friends in the podcast industry, a lot of clients in the podcast industry, and a lot of friends in the podcast industry, which is how I got in here. But my the way that we booked you was by me letting go of control and allowing my OBM, and she came up with this genius idea. We were speaking to this PR girl, and she was like, yeah, you should check out the journal requests. And then my OBM said, you know what? I wonder if we could do like a reverse journal request and ask for what we're looking for our
Mhm.
podcast. And I was like, okay, let's try it. So she did it, and it was like, it was so
That's it.
awesome. Like we've had so many awesome people, and it's been really really cool. But this, like even that just gives me such hope in my own business, because you know it's so hard when you're starting a business all on your own, and it's all just your little baby, and no one
Mhm.
else is allowed to touch the baby, and then suddenly you let other people in, right? And it's that letting go. And we had Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First.
Love
We
that
had
book.
him on the podcast. He's actually on the podcast just a few weeks ago, and he really, his book Clockwork really helped me with the hiring of staff, and just
Mhm.
realizing that I gotta I gotta let them sometimes also make mistakes, you know?
Yep.
But if I do that, then the payoff for doing that is they're not afraid to come out with amazing suggestions that are genius as well.
Mhm.
And I don't think in a million years I would have come up with that suggestion. And there she was, and she came up with a suggestion, and I think that I was so happy, because I was like, this is amazing. And then when she put it out, she put out the request, and within, like, I think it was like within 24 hours, we had over 20 people that had applied to be on the podcast. And it was like, wow, this is so cool. And so, yeah, I think this is, yeah, that was definitely a little like come to Jesus moment of like, yes, let your people do their thing, right?
That's it. That's it. Let them do their job. What they're, don't look over their shoulders. That's all. That's hard for everybody to do as well.
So
And
hard.
one of the things that if you have staff, you have a team, you have to let them make mistakes, because it's not like we as business owners never make them either. So
No,
having that
exactly.
expectation of your employees being perfect is ridiculous, because you
Totally
did work. I
ridiculous.
mean, you would not have reached the level of success you are unless you are really lucky, without having messed up many, many, many times along the way. I
And
can tell,
creating
speak from
brand
personal
new
experience.
mistakes that the world has never
Oh,
seen before.
oh yeah,
Because I am
I've
sure
made
I did a few
so
there.
many mistakes. There are probably spelling mistakes on our website right now because I wrote some of the text. I mean, there are mistakes all over the place. I'm kind of giving yourself a little bit of that humility, is saying I make mistakes. Of course, my team's going to make mistakes. Obviously, there's a limit. If they make mistakes all the time, they might not be a great fit. But
Exactly, right?
if they
But
mess
like
up one out
giving
of
them the
five times, that's fine.
opportunity,
That's it.
giving them the space where you're not breathing down their necks. And then the offset of that is you get this, like, they can support you with like their genius, which is so
Mhm.
incredible. So tell us what's next for you in your world. Like what are you looking to unfold next in your world? Because obviously you've got are you working on any super secret projects, or what is going on?
So the big project I'm working on right now is Podcast Talk. I mean, we literally launched officially, opened the launch like 12 weeks ago at the time of this interview. So I've been working on it for about a year, but first users, we have about 100 users in there right now. That's probably what I'm working on for the next 5 years at least. So generally, in my experience, it takes me about 5 years to get to a point where I can start hiring CEOs, COOs to run the company. My goal is I'm pretty good at getting them to seven to mid seven figures. And I know that's my zone of excellence. After that, it takes a different skill set to run companies. It's less about creativity. It's more about execution every single day at that point. And that's not my skill set. I'm not like the detail guy who's going to get that one thing and make it perfect. You make it a little bit more perfect every single day. No, I like to build it from scratch, kind of this blank
Mm-hmm.
canvas, build it, and then I need somebody else in there to kind of get the lines to all align on my painting, right? That's another skill set. I hire people to do that. The next step, it's not super secret, but I'm already talking to people about it, is if all works out, my long-term goal is to probably sell these companies. We were talking about why I built them. This is my dream company to build. Is I would like to build a network of co-working spaces around the world in developing countries, where half of the co-working space is worked on a charity basis, which means it takes people who cannot afford to be in these kind of places, brings them in, provides them with the training to take their businesses online. I'm talking to people in the Turkey, the Philippines, here in Mexico already about their experiences with co-working spaces. And I'd like to build that into a social enterprise. So the half that pays for the other half. We kind of get a little investment in the company, but I want to be able to open up the online world and the English speaking online world to people in countries and with who would not otherwise have access to it, because it can change lives. In the Philippines, I tell people it's easy to build a business that makes $500 to $1,000 a month online if you work for a year. Now, if I told that to somebody in the United States or the UK, they'd be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. What's $500 to $1,000? But if I told somebody that in Mexico, in the Philippines, in many countries in Africa, that a year from now, you can make $500 a month. These are niche businesses. It's huge. It's from poverty to middle upper class. That will be the goal. And that's what I'd like to dedicate like the second half of my career to, is to that organization. So that's why I'm building these businesses now. You were asking for the common thread. Common thread is build them to a certain size that I can sell them, which means then I can support this new business without having to make it a charity, because then I won't have to ask other people for money all the time. I want to start it myself, more like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on a much smaller scale. But that's my dream for the next stage of my life.
I love it. And it's, do you know, and I can see the vision of it, because I can see as the entrepreneurs that are using the co-working spaces, maybe the digital nomads, as they're using the co-working spaces, that perhaps they could even teach on a charitable basis and things like that, right? Like how fun is that, right? To really give back and to be able to create the social change for the world, which is, I think so powerful and impactful. I love that. I love your vision, and I'm holding it for you so that I want to see it. I want to come and work in one of these co-working spaces.
That's it. We have you come and talk. That's what we want to do. We want to bring successful people from all over the world, exactly like that. And especially if they're in, Turkey, Mexico. I don't think most luckily, if you build successful businesses, you meet other entrepreneurs. I have a decent network of people I can reach out to. They'd be happy to fly down. Hey, come on down to Mexico. We'll show you around. And all you have to do is talk about what you love to do anyway, in front of people who need. Exactly. I don't think it'll take very much convincing to get people to do this. Then how about you go to Istanbul for a week and, Turkey, and we'll show you the covered bazaar. And, you can also talk about business over there, and we'll take you to the Philippines too. We hang out on the beach and do it again. I mean, once every year, bring this. Amazing. Yeah, speaking for myself, I would do it if somebody invited me to do it today, right? I'd be like,
it could be really powerful. I mean, like, I'm an ideas person, so my brain is just going like, I'm like thinking you could do a high-end mastermind, and part of the mastermind is to get to travel around. I'm
in a high-end mastermind now. They're going to be like the first people I invite right now to that, because I'm a huge fan of masterminds. Yeah,
they're going to love it. So yeah, it's so powerful. And I think this is, I remember, so I'm of the generation when it was all like Band-Aids and Feed the World and all these things, right? And I remember the saying, I think it was Bob Geldof that said it, like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, give a man a fishing rod, he can eat for life, right? And it's something, that powerful statement has stayed with me all my life, is the idea of personal empowerment, because I'm not a super fan of charity either. Like, I think charity has its place, but what I would really like to see, and I think people who are in the receiving end of charity, what they would really like is to be able to do it under their own steam, right? And this is why projects like this for me are so exciting, because that's what I like, is personal empowerment versus, and this is why I love things like the Trade Not Aid projects, where they encourage people into business and things. And I think this is where entrepreneurship, for me personally, is so exciting, because it can take someone who has been living on the breadline or even below the breadline and elevate their lives into a place where, you said exactly as you said, like upper middle class. And what we take for granted, like maybe like $500, it's, it is not the biggest amount of money in the West world, and yet that could elevate a family into living a life that's so different. And even at that elevation, their spending power in their community expands exponentially. And this is like a big part of the $1 million experiment, is this idea that we can create conscious millionaires, that we can bring people into the awareness, into the mindset of really creating the change that they wish to see in the world.
I agree 100%. That's what I want to dedicate the rest of my life to, is to do that kind of thing. As an anecdotal, for those people who don't believe that $500 is a lot of money, my cousin in the Philippines is an engineer at Texas Instruments in Manila. He makes $500 a month. An engineer with a college degree at one of the biggest companies in the world. That's how much money he makes, and that makes him middle upper class. He's, he can send his kids to private school. He has, not a mansion, but by the local standards, he lives in a nice house. He has, he can't afford a BMW. I mean, that's it. But I mean, all the things to make his life happy and his family happy, he makes enough for $500 a month. He made 1,000. Yeah, I mean, that's he would, he'd have a maid and a
It's
cook
game changer,
at that point.
right?
Yeah, I mean, he'd have people helping him at home and all the rest of it at $1,000. That is 1% in a lot of parts of the world.
Wow, I love it. I love it. I love your vision going forward. Thank you so much, Ray, for coming to speak to us. Tell people where they can find you, and we're going to link in the show notes and everything like that. So, but if somebody's listening to this and is like, I cannot wait, I need to check this guy out, where can they find you?
Absolutely. And I encourage people to do so. I offer it all the time. Entrepreneurship is my sport. I just love to talk about it. I love to help other entrepreneurs. I love to meet other entrepreneurs. So I'll also date myself. I'm not on the more modern social networks, but you can look for Ray Blakney on Facebook. And if you look for the picture of somebody sword fighting, you found me. That's me there. You can also go to my website, rayblakney.com, RayBlakney.com. So there's a contact us page there, or you can contact me through my two primary businesses, livelingua.com or podcasttalk.com. For livelingua.com, just contact the customer support. They'll pass me the email. I'll just say, hey, Ray told me to contact you, and they'll forward it on to me. For podcasttalk.com, since we're in the beta, you can actually go to the contact us page right now. That goes straight to me still because we're so early in the company. I don't have a customer support team yet. So, just fill out the contact form and it will get in touch with me as well. Finally, you can follow me on Twitter, even though I rarely post. That it's at rayblakney.com as well. At Ray Blakney as well.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this.
Likewise, Joanna. Thanks for having me on.